health. To jump right in, Linux Foundation Public Health was created, organized back in 2020 with a mission to use open source software for public health authorities, and I've been expanding that to digital health around the world. Our initial focus, as you would understand, is open source solutions, frameworks, and collaboration specifically to work with public health authorities and help address COVID-19 at the time, with one of our major focus areas being the Google Apple exposure notification. We also developed the COVID Credentials Initiative for activities around the world that were involved with standards and frameworks for developing COVID credentials, vaccination certificates, et cetera, with the EU's DDCC, the India DIVOC, the virtual health cards and VCI initiative here within the US, et cetera. And then since then, we have been growing into other aspects of public health agency support, as well as other digital health type activities that we've been pursuing. Just a little bit about the Linux Foundation to give you a little background. That's a highlight of our major project and foundation actions to the right. As you can see, more than 2,000 members across 40 countries. We literally have open source volunteers and Linux Foundation members in every time zone, 100% of Fortune 100 companies, et cetera. Most exciting thing is, I think, having more than 400 open source projects with 40,000 developers at any one time contributing to the open source code base. And if you look at the list on the right, you'll probably see some names there you recognize from open source projects and initiatives. Many you very well may work with as part of your work. Linux Foundation Public Health, as well as things like automotive, energy, a few others, are more of what I call the industry sector facing Linux Foundation projects. Those have evolved over the last couple of years, where activities in some of the technology specific work like networking or IoT or web has begun to grow to represent ecosystems and areas of emphasis within specific industry areas. And so Linux Foundation Public Health is no exception really. What we do as a 501c6 membership association is provide a large sustainable ecosystem for an open source software project. There's millions of open source software projects in free and open source software or FOSS that as many times is my brother Larry has something up in GitHub. And what we want to do is create collaborative communities with an investment to create sustainable open source lifecycle management for projects. And all of that below highlights some of it. The last one on the end, application security, is one of our newest and biggest initiatives. It's a multi-million-dollar investment from Linux Foundation members to develop application security tools, which we are inculcating into all of our open source projects to be able to offer security code reviews and security scanning after things like the Log4j, Log4Shell type debacle, and making sure that security is built in as part of the lifecycle management process. This is a quick overview of our members within the Linux Foundation Public Health, just to kind of give you a feel for what it is. We have some new ones adding, some old ones moving on, because there's always some dynamics involved with who's involved. But just to kind of give you a sense of what our participation is like. And what they're really doing, the reasons you join, is that opportunity for industry collaboration, which is consistent across all Linux Foundation projects, especially Linux Foundation Public Health. Our particular focus and involvement with the public health audience. We have a stakeholder organization of about 35 representatives from state and local public health authorities that we convene on a monthly basis, called the Disease Investigative Technology Collaborative. We also have a Public Health Authority Council. We have relationships with the Association of State and Tribal Health Organizations, ASTHO, the Council for State and Tribal Epidemiologists, CSTE, relationships with HIMSS, as many of you also may be members as well. And really the market opportunity, at the end of the day, this is companies making a choice to participate and contribute resources, both as a member and participate in projects. And why that's important, where's the market opportunity? Because a rising tide raises all boats in the case of open source software. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with things like Kubernetes. Kubernetes serves as an open source foundation to how cloud infrastructure works. And that was done and continues to be supported through collaboration of the world's largest cloud service providers. because they recognize a need to develop things in an open source basis that they can each offer as market opportunities for making their particular market segment or market activities better. In the case of Linux Foundation Public Health, the output of that is something that is impactful for supporting digital health and healthcare as we know it, which everyone agrees, especially in a post-COVID world, benefits from improvement. Our organizational structure, which is also a snapshot of any one of our open source projects and organizational governance. There's an organizational governing board made up of the board of directors at the premier level, technical advisory committees that are responsible for reviewing advancements and changes and new proposed projects as they come through our pipelines. That's supported by input from academic and research institutions as associate members. We have that Public Health Advisory Council, as I mentioned, and then the hosted projects, which are managed by groups of volunteer maintainers and Linux Foundation members. And then all the way over on the right is people like me and other members of the team that provide that supporting membership infrastructure for supporting the projects that we're working on. That's it, and I'm more than happy to make these slides available after the call for anyone. I'm going to jump over because there was the desired discussion around Hyperledger. And so I'll walk you through our vision that was laid out for 2022 as part of what was going on. So we're all familiar with what blockchain technologies are, what's a distributed ledger. I'll skip that and I'll get right down into the real key part of what we're working on here with, and I apologize for that. There we go. There we go. This is where I should have started for you. Global cross-industry consortium of communities advancing business blockchain technologies. And, this is where the hair on the back of my neck kind of stands up. I personally am a very strong supporter of this concept of enterprise blockchain as a differentiation from simply crypto-oriented public chains. And the differences there, both in terms of architecture and configuration, but still enable a principle for decentralization and distributed ledgers. We have been supporting this for about, I think Hyperledger is almost 10 years old for its basic projects and the number of projects it has. As you can see there, it is part of a number of other security related and networking LF projects that are all very active, that in many cases have similar participation and involvement. There we go. 5 years, I apologize. 5 years since launch, 17 projects of which I'll capture, 3 releases at 1.0, 2 of them at 2.0, 14 active groups and communities and SIGs, of which people are welcome to go to hyperledger.org, investigate the SIGs and participate, just like here in the case of Act-Iac. We also have a very strong meetup structure too on a geographic basis, which of course now kind of a bit post-pandemic, we're doing a lot more in person, especially in the DC area. The Hyperledger Dc Meetup community is very strong, and lots of participants on a global basis. And I'd call out that we have strong participation from China on a number of things that we're doing. Similar to Linux Foundation, Hyperledger Foundation also has a modular approach to hosting projects, very much similar to that chart that I showed you under LFPH in terms of organization, governing board, technical steering committees, and then specific project steering committees based on the types of projects. We take a modular approach to our development so that the building blocks kind of relate to one another and are interrelated amongst the various types of chain projects that we're involved in. And here's a good summary overall. Many of you, of course, are probably familiar with Hyperledger Fabric. That's our largest and most mature blockchain project that we have. I spend most of my time around Hyperledger Indy and Aries, which are specifically focused on decentralized identity. And then you can see the other ones are in various stages of development. Hyperledger Sawtooth is pretty cool. That is a specific Hyperledger construct that uses proof of elapsed time as part of leveraging the Intel SGX secure enclave encryption mechanism, and is also part of the Confidential Computing Consortium, which is another initiative under the Linux Foundation. And then the other ones are in Other ones offer some great promise, and I would offer you to investigate things like Cactus and Caliper. Also relate to on-chain, off-chain, and then the relationship between, like for instance, Hyperledger Bezu, which was developed to work in conjunction with Ethereum, provide an underlying Hyperledger enterprise blockchain store and distributed ledger that interfaces at the ERC level. Oh, and I'm sorry, I can give you a summary right there. Like I mentioned, Bezu is an Ethereum client, can run on various networks, uses both several consensus algorithms as well, and is designed for interfacing permissioning schemes and credentials between organizations. Haven't personally done any work with Hyperledger Burrow, but it's part of the specification for the Ethereum virtual machine. Fabric, like I mentioned, probably the first and largest enterprise blockchain application, and serves as the basis for the HHS blockchain solution that was put in place about 4 years ago, and supports a federal ATO. Indy and Hyperledger Aries are both associated with decentralized identity, which is another presentation in of itself. And then Iroha, which is a little bit newer around blockchain frameworks for infrastructure projects that require ledgers. I went through that fairly quickly. I appreciate that. More than happy to answer any questions, have any further discussion if there's anything that I missed or would like to address. And Josh, turn it back over to you.
Hey, thanks, Jim. I appreciate that. Very, detailed, concise information that you've given to our working group on your efforts over at the Linux Foundation, Hyperledger. Does anyone have anything they'd like to address or ask? I'd like to open it up for some Q&A.
Yeah, and again, I apologize. I don't happen to see the chat, so if there was anything thrown in the chat, I missed it.
Jim, I just want to say it's great. It's great to hear your voice, and I hope that we can get together sometime. Hopefully, if you're in the DC area sometime soon.
Yeah, absolutely, Gerard. It's great to hear yours as well, my friend. Hard to believe it's been what, 7 years since you and I were sitting around in Kilroy's in Fairfax talking about the Government Blockchain Association.
Well, and I remember the training class that we did over at GSA.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
And I want to talk to you offline sometime, because it sounds like there's some cool things circling back around. I think there's an opportunity for us. So
sure, absolutely, my friend. Anytime.
This is Sandy Barsky.
Hi, Sandy.
Great presentation. So one question that hits my mind is, with this working group that Josh has been leading, is what we can do, because this working group is not just Act-Iac, it's GBA, obviously, and any others, is we have some projects that Josh has led us on. Those are wrapping up, and we're always looking at where we can collaborate and what the need is for helping government. So what ideas might you have to share with us at this time? Over.
Absolutely, Sandy. Great question. And I think I would immediately direct you to Jim Mason and the public sector SIG, which I don't always get a chance to participate in as much, but Jim has led the public sector SIG and the Hyperledger Foundation for quite a while, and has worked on various use cases. I think there are some members of the SIG that are also members of Act-Iac. So we have some initial cultural bridging already, but more than happy to coordinate and assist with cross participation there and discuss specific use cases if that's of interest.
Hey, sorry about that. Jim, I had a question. So I noticed that the VA in particular had done some work with the open source community a while back, and that it seemed like the VA had kind of stepped away from that. Do you have any maybe insight on how to, or what some incentives would be to better align it with an open source project such as Hyperledger?
Yeah, Josh, I tell you that touches a nerve, because you're talking to the guy that will rant for the remaining 45 minutes about Vista, the open source community, the ecosystems in the VA, and your current commercial decisions concerning your next generation of EHR. But I like to think that there is still a strong underlying core for open source participation in the VA. Would be more than happy to talk to you about it a bit more and where that ecosystem may reside. I would say at this point, my perspective is from the environments that the sort of collaborative open source ecosystem that you had with Ocera and around Vista and looking at open source applications has probably fragmented a bit. Kind of the war is over, so you have pockets of rebellion around in various places. Perhaps building those collaboratively, and I've been very interested from a Linux Foundation standpoint to talk to someone at OINT to see what areas open source could continue to thrive and be promulgated, recognizing that Cerner is the future for the VA, but it's going to take years to get there. And as you saw from my slide, there's still a need for active lifecycle management, not only with Vista, but other various open source applications. And one thing I didn't touch upon is our participation in the international community. We're a member of the Digital Public Goods Alliance. We work closely with UNDP and UNICEF, Regan Streif, Open HIE Foundation, et cetera. And there is a very vibrant and actively invested open source community for healthcare internationally that I think offers lots of parallels for the US in general and the VA specifically. We've been in the process of setting up a VA advisory council. Our board of directors approved that about a month or two ago. I haven't really turned up the fire on that just yet to start bringing folks in, but that may be a great next stepping stone and would welcome a chance to talk to you and Jorge and others about it.
Hey, that sounds promising, Jim. I would certainly be interested in hearing more about it. I also shared a link in chat, and I'll send you an email as well. The VA is having our Artificial Intelligence Office, the National Artificial Intelligence Institute, is having a summit focusing on brain health and the role that AI plays in brain health. And we're having that summit in DC from September 7th through the 9th. It's open and free to everyone who would like to attend. So I dropped the registration link in chat. I'll send you an email. And if you're in the area, perhaps you could swing by and say hello to us.
Thank you very much. I will attempt to do that, but I'll also elaborate. I am having follow-up conversations with the Ontario Brain Institute, which has been doing some open source development, and we're looking at some collaboration. And then within the Linux Foundation, we also have the LF AI and Data Foundation and the Open 3D Foundation. Between those three, we've been talking about more open source AI applications in healthcare, as well as digital twins and digital therapeutics and the relationship between all three of those in an open source environment. I saw the wonderful XR display that you all had at the interoperability showcase, but I haven't had a chance to chat with anybody there. I will be heading on a plane on the 10th for Dublin for our open source summit in Europe. But either myself or someone else may be able to come by from the DC area and participate. But if not, let's certainly, if there's an opportunity for virtual participation, that would be easy, and certainly love it as a stepping stone for other conversations.
Jim.
Hello.
Question. Hi, this is Dr. Cheryl Lohman. Will that brain conference be discussing things like brain fog from Gulf War syndrome or post-concussive syndromes or long COVID, again, with the cognitive problems that it brings?
Excellent question, Josh. I'll have to defer that one to you in terms of the agenda or some of the focus of the conference.
Hi, hey Cheryl. So this is Josh. So my understanding is that yes, we will have speakers on a variety of topics, and some of the things that you had mentioned will be addressed. I know that some things such as obviously your mental health, such as PTSD, your physical brain health or that of veterans, as a result of things like burn pit exposure. These are definitely hot topics that we are looking to have addressed at the summit. So I would certainly encourage you, if you have an interest in any of those types of things, and anyone else on this call, to go ahead and register, and we hope to see you there. And thank you. Does anyone have any other questions for
Joshua? I want to make a comment regarding what you said regarding the open source Vista community. And I think one of the things you should also be aware is that when the VA stood up the Osera community, as you may or may not know, Vista has had an incredibly strong open source industry that was supporting the open source code of Vista. But we don't have that anymore, obviously, with the Cerner deployment and the Cerner acquisition and whatnot. So I think, that in and of itself was one of the significant differences between to go open source or not. But VA, as in general, OINT specifically, there are many open source projects throughout the Veterans Affairs in many different pockets. If you look hard enough, you'll find many of them. So I don't think it's an either or. There's a lot of open source code that runs in many of these projects at the Veteran Affairs currently. And so it's not a change of administrations that oftentimes people will attribute to, is the administration in support or not in support of open source code. I mean, it's open source code. It has been part of the fabric of the VA for decades, and I'm sure it will continue to be.
Jorge, I think that was wonderfully said, and with that in mind, yeah, I think there are still many pockets, and you could probably speak to some specific concerted efforts in OINT much better than I could, and that personally excites me to see is there opportunities post Osera to help with that sort of life cycle management and collaboration and community that we may be able to bring in and foster. I know there's still a few companies out there that are called upon for various O&M tasks, and of course things that happen at the VAMC and VISN level, and would love to compare notes.
Hey folks, so this is Josh. We have just another maybe 2 minutes with Mr. St. Clair. Does anyone else have anything they would like to bring up or bring to this group for discussion?
I've got something that's not specifically related to the Linux Foundation, but I don't know if I should hold it until sort of general comments.
Yes, please, Gerard. Happy to hear from you, but I want to make sure we
Sure,
make some time with Jim.
Yeah. So this is a call for speakers. We got two things that we're looking for speakers. Mark,
Gerard,
I don't know if you said it.
Could you hold that?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, could you hold that for just a moment for me?
Okay.
Thank you. All right, folks. Well, Jim, I just want to say thank you for being here and speaking with us today and taking the time out of your incredibly busy schedule. I will be stopping the recording now.